Okay. So Mishnah 7 is got some really great concepts in it. It starts off by saying, that's not what I want to do. It starts off by saying that Esos Sfirot Belima, it's on page 57 if you're following along in the Aryeh Kaplan edition. Esos Sfirot Belima, 10 spheros of no thingness. Noatz Sofan B'tchilasan, B'tchilasan B'sofan. The end is wedged into the beginning, V'tchilasan, and the beginning B'sofan into the end. Kishalheves Geshura B'gacheles, like a flame as it's bound to the coal. Adon Yachid ve'ein lo sheni, that the Lord, the Master, is one or unique and has no other, has no second. Lifnei echad ma'ata sofer, and before one, what do you count? So let's just do some association with what we're very familiar with L'chadodi, right? L'chadodi is a Kabbalistic poem written by Al-Kabetz, who was, I believe, the brother-in-law of Rabbi Moshe Cordovero and a contemporary of the Ari, and of course, Rabbi Moshe Cordovero. And there we say, and it's again quoting earlier things, Sof Ma'aseh Machshava Tchila,
right?
That God's final action is what his original intention is. And for example, Aryeh Kaplan explains it in his book Inner Space, and it's taken from other earlier sources, that if you look at an architect, let's say to understand the parable better, a person wants to build a home, and they're also, let's say, an architect. They're very gifted. So there's two things that go into building a home. The vision of the homeowner, if somebody had all the money in the world and was allowed to kind of think about what is it they want to have in a home. So this fellow, who's the architect and the potential creator of a new home, envisions a home. He thinks about it in his head, what he'd like to see it. Then he starts drafting it. And he's an architect. He's also a contractor and a builder and an interior designer and everything. So imagine he was all those things, or even if he wasn't all of those things, he knew all of those people. So he would hire all the right people to do it. So each person that he hires to do a particular part, whether it's laying the foundation, whether it's putting up the drywall, whether it's installing the windows, they're each doing a particular part of it, but it's only when it's actually completed that the vision that he originally or she originally saw in their mind's eye of what their home is, they want, is actualized. It's not it's not the middle stages. You're not the person isn't dreaming about the foundation or the windows. They're dreaming about the finished home ready to be lived in, designed with furniture inside and the whole thing ready to move into. So that's reminiscent of this idea. No, it's sofan b'chilasan. The end, the sof ma'aseh, is wedged in the very beginning. So Kabbalistic terminology that we're most oftenly associated with that is Keter and Malchut. Okay, it doesn't. We don't have to use those words. The Sefer Yetzirah doesn't use those words. We're so familiar with those words. We can say the Sefer Yetzirah should have, could have, didn't, but meant to, and you could do it on your own. Whatever makes you feel good. Also, we do want the Sefer Yetzirah to fit in to what we know about Kabbalah, even if from an academic level, there's a lot of uncertainty about how to fit it in because of when it's written and so on. And we heard from Moshe Idel in the Day of Kabbalah about that. It doesn't mean that we're not able to kind of look at, if not the actual historical context, our kind of body of knowledge of Kabbalah and translate it into the terms that we're familiar with. And because you have to understand, even if academically that's questionable because of things that Moshe Idel outlines, but the Kabbalists did, for the most part, do that. In other words, if you're in a certain context of a school of thought that does do it, to not do it also has a certain kind of smacks of a problem. You know, so when you walk into one type of school with the ideas of another school, and you tell them, well, your school doesn't know what they're talking about. It's like, actually, no, they know what they're talking about. It's just a different school. It's a different way, a different process. It's a different attitudes and so on. So again, there's no problem with trying to interpret the Sefer Yetzirah. I like the idea of it being secretive, that it's hard to really interpret. And I like a lot of Moshe Idel's questions about the problem with interpreting it. And I happen to agree, not because I agree that he's right, because I also don't know what the Sefer Yetzirah is talking about. I'm no expert. I don't know. He doesn't know, and I don't know. We probably don't know for different reasons, but we still both don't know. So I agree with him. But my lack of knowing is because I don't have that much knowledge. His lack of knowing is because he just feels he can't place it historically to give it the context that would help him decipher the period of who wrote it and where it was written, who wrote it, or approximately the type of people who would have written in it, and what they already knew and thought and understood in these words. Okay. So the end is embedded in the beginning, or as I said, wedged in the beginning and the beginning in the end, which means when we achieve whatever we're going to achieve, in the mashal and the metaphor of the house could be seen as the Beit HaMikdash, the third Beit HaMikdash, for example. When that finality of redemption and being in our home and the third Beit HaMikdash would be realized and recognized, at that point, that would be connected to the beginning, to what the original intention is. We'll realize our purpose. Now, this other phrase, kishal heves kshur begachelas, like a flame that's bound into its coal. Now, if we were to look at a flame within a coal, there's a couple things there that would come to mind. One is the concept of the relationship between the fire and the coal, in the sense that somebody with lesser knowledge could think the fire is inhabiting the coal. It's like two things that temporarily came together, like a snail in its shell. So the fire is like in the body of the coal is this living, so to speak, metaphorically living fire. Or the fire is within and is actually created by, although it's not a self-igniting coal, which is, by the way, a thing in rabbinic literature is called the tzur. I don't know if it's a tzur chalamish. It's some type of like flinty rock that was used to actually strike like the equivalent of a match-like thing to create a spark to make a fire with. So the Kabbalists actually talk about 3 or 4 different stages of inner interiority, an interiority that's actually there, which is the shalhevet hakshura begachelet, the expression here, the fire within the coal. It's not revealed. So, for example, it's revealed through its heat, but you may not see it. So, for example, the Talmud has a whole discussion of a coal that has the fire is apparent versus the fire is, the ember is like not burning brightly. It's dimmed, right? So let's see what the Vilna Gaon says, because we're gonna do a little bit of the Vilna Gaon. So the Vilna Gaon says that's a metaphor of how to see this concept of the end and the beginning, that relationship between the two. He says there's 5 fires within a flame, or 5 grades of fire. And one is the blue that surrounds the wick. And then he starts getting into the sfirot of Malchus and relates that to the Chashmal, Mitoch ha'esh, in the prophetic descriptions of, these visions. And then he goes on and says 4 additional colors. And he relates them to sfirot. And he talks about the or is Keneged Chachma, which is called Zohar, and so on. And then he says the one that's the least comprehensible is darkness. And that's a higher sphera. And so he explains spherotically how the concept of ket, the relationship between keter and malchus, that we already talked about. I don't find this. I was looking in the Sefer Yetzirah of the Vilna Gaon, his Pirush, and some of it is interesting. I like when he's uncharacteristically long here. The Vilna Gaon is known to be super short. Here he doesn't spare any words. I like when I find a short one. This is one of the longest ones. So not what I'm really looking for. So let's do the next one. So this is not, I didn't find a hit in this particular comment right here. So for the master is singular, he has no second. Before 1, what do you count? Now, a lot of this is reminiscent of I know David Newton can tell you, a classic in the Talmud that we don't ask what came before, right? There's certain things that we're not allowed to discuss. And part of the secret of the Sefer Yetzirah is things that are off limit, that are brought up and we're told once again, they're off limit. Like before 1, what do you count? Meaning we don't count before 1. Okay. So on a very deep level, it's explaining perhaps why there is only one, the mystery of oneness. As like we say in the Kigavna, what's the mystery of God's oneness or God's unity? So perhaps you could say the oneness, that there isn't anything before, there isn't a second, is the mystery of Keter and Malchut, the number 10 and number 1, or 1 and 10. It's ultimately 1. There isn't really 10, and there isn't really 2, and there isn't 0. There's just 1. Okay, so now we go to, again, it's very mysterious. I don't really know the pshat. There's many. So let's go to number 8, to Mishnah 8 on page 66. And this is following right on the theme I said of the mystery of the Ma'aser Merkava that the Gemara describes that needs to be kept a secret by and large, very exclusive and not talked about. And when it is talked about, it's very discreet and to who it is and how it's described. So here it says, Esa Sfirat Blima, Belom Picham L'daber, V'libach L'haher. The 10 spheres of nothingness, keep your mouth quiet in regards to them, and even your heart from contemplating or thinking. Now, we understand why you can't speak about it because it's a secret, but what about your heart? And the answer is that if you understand this to be a Kabbalistic manual for creating a golem or some inner world that you enter into its dimension similar to Hechalot literature, then it's warning the uninitiated to be careful not to jump in because the mind will go to where you're not ready to go. Or alternatively, speculation, the very nature of speculation, even spiritual speculation, is problematic. So don't think about things you're not allowed to think about, like what came before, like certain philosophical questions that could undermine the faith are just off limits. So you can learn it in one of those three ways. What happens if your mouth is running to speak? Which reminds me of an expression in the Talmud. There was a rabbi who would be asked to pray for people, and they would ask, and he would say, this one will live and this one will die. And he was right. So they said, how do you know who's going to live and who's going to die? He says, Im shagar tfilato b'fiv. Some expression like if the words of prayer are flowing from my mouth, I know my prayer is being accepted. But if I stumble in my prayer, so then I suspect not. But so here it's a similar expression. Your mouth is running. In other words, your mouth is running. It usually means a blabbermouth, but here it's you're almost like not in control of your mouth when it comes to the secrets of the Torah. That you're told be quiet, but if you can't control yourself and it's flowing through you, and your thoughts, your heart is just thinking of these things. Shuv l'makom, go back to the place. Now, this is a concept of in Ezekiel, chapter 1 of Ezekiel. Shlokach nemer, that's what the verse in the first chapter of Ezekiel is referring to when it says v'chayot ratzo b'shov, and the angels that are called chayot, sounds like a chaya, an animal, a wild animal, but it's an animal angel. It's an angel. Ratzo v'shov, they were running and returning. V'al zeh nichras bris. And regarding this, the covenant was made. Now, we already said earlier in the chapter, it's already referencing itself, and much of Sefer Yetzirah, as hard as it is to understand, becomes more clear as you just go through it. It says, Esa Sfira Blima, Misra Esa Etzbaot, Chamesh Kneged Chamesh, Bris Yachid Mechuvan Be'emsa. Already, right away in Mishnah 3, it says Bris Yachid Mechuvan Be'emsa. And so we're already introduced to this concept of the covenant. And what is that covenant? That covenant is the covenant of the tongue, which in this context isn't just about Lashon Hara. It really is about the covenant of not speaking the secrets of the Torah. And that, again, fits in well with certain parts of the Talmud. So when you are trying, if I was an academic, I would actually venture to guess that it was the Talmudic period that the Sefer Yetzirah was written in. I'd say 3rd, 4th century. I wouldn't. Now, it is possible that there's different iterations of the Sefer Yetzirah, and some of it was written 1st century, maybe even earlier. But in this version, there's enough things in there that you'd say it's Talmudic period. Again, I'm not a scholar that compares, words or ideas, but that would be, as a non-scholar, just a rabbi. Rabbi isn't trained in that way. I'm not going to claim that I'm an academic, I'm a professor. I'm not, but that would be my guess. And this is what the covenant is. So I could stop here, but I think I want to just go further. Number 9, Mishnah 9, page 68. Everybody with me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Any questions?
Yep.
Okay, we'll go on. Yes?
Where is it? Where is this in the Sefaria? Is there?
So
you
yeah,
know?
it's in the
Sorry for
chat.
interrupting. You know,
It's in the chat, in this Faria. Zev put it in the chat, but if you want to find it not in the chat, look under Kabbalah and one of the books of Sefer Yetzirah.
okay, got it. I think it's not actually. Oh, here now it's in the chat. Perfect.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, got it.
Okay,
Thanks a
let's
lot.
continue then. As a Sfirat Lima, we're in Mishnah 9 of chapter 1. 10 spheres of no thingness. Achas Ruach Elokim. The first is the spirit of Elokim, Chaim, the Elokim Chaim. Baruch U'Mevarach Shemo, blessed and blessed is his name. Sholchei Ha'olamim, of the life of the universe, says Kol v'Ruach v'Dibor v'Hu Ruach HaKodesh. Kol is sound. Ruach is breath. Dibor is speech. And it is the Holy Spirit. Now, again, we know that Ruach is an expression that's used in the Torah, like Ruach Elokim Merachefet al Pnei Hamayim, the Spirit of God hovering over the water. We know that the Talmud uses the expression of Asar Mamarot, or the 10 utterances, or the Dibrot, right? When it comes to the Asar Dibrot, the 10 commandments. So here it's interesting because it's Dibor, and that fits in with the whole world being created by divine speech, which the premise of that is in the Talmud, but here it's uniquely translated into the Hebrew language and the 231 the Aleph Bays, the 3 categories of the Aleph Bays, and we're going to get into all those details. So here we're just kind of laying out the groundwork of the 4. We're going to go through. Are we going through all 10 now or all 4? Yeah, we're going through the 4, and then in number 13. We're going to do the 7. So we're going through that. When it says Eser Sfirot B'Lima, these are the 10 Sfirot. And again, while the Kabbalists learned that the 10 Sfirot of Sefer Yetzirah are the same 10 Sfirot of the Zohar, it can be, or not, but that's how the Kabbalists learned it. And they debated it because it's kind of cryptic. The number 13, Mishnah 13, which will align 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 with the directions, are also somewhat complicated, but we'll do a little bit of kind of the Kabbalistic interpretations of which Sfirot are what, but we're not going to get stuck in it. It's not a perfect science here, and like I said, there's not necessarily agreement on them. So the first of the Sfirot obviously is Keter, or not. If you were going in order, you'd say, okay, it's Keter. Let's go on. but it may not be Keter. So Mishnah 10, it's on page 71. Shtayim Ruach Meruach. Because the first one is Ruach Elokim Chaim Baruch Shemo. It's the Spirit of God. But again, that could be Keter because it's God. On the other hand, it could be Bina because it's associated with Gvura, with Elokim. I don't know what it is. But the second one is Ruach Meruach. So there's almost like the Ruach Elokim. We know there's the idea of the Spirit of the divine. And now there's an extension of the Spirit of the divine in spirit from spirit. So that's number 2. Ruach miruach chakak v'chatzaba esim b'shtayim otiyot. Now here it would fit in with a classic understanding that in the beginning maybe Keter is the otiyot in Keter are not actually carved out, so to speak. It's pre-language in Keter. Keter is like before you can express yourself verbally. So the second sphera, whatever it is where it's engraved and carved 22 foundation letters, right? Now we'll talk about 22 foundation letters and shalosh imash v'shavik fulot v'shtayim asar pshutot. The 3 mothers, the 7 doubles, the 12 elementals. We're going to describe those later of what they are. So there's no reason to stop here. They have their own elucidation within Sefer Yetzirah. And v'ruach achas mehen, and one breath is from them. So the commentaries brought down by Aryeh Kaplan say that the breath from breath is going on Malchut, the lowest spirit. So that would make sense in the context of what we started off with, Mishnah 7, that says, no tchilatan b'sofam, b'sofam b'chilatan, the beginning and the end are interconnected. So there is a svara to say that because the letters could be connected to Malchut. Okay, we go on to Mishnah 11 on page 73. Shalosh, the third of the 10 sfirot, is mayim miruach. Instead of ruach from ruach, it's water. So we're going from elokut to ruach meruach, elokut ruach, ruach meruach, mayim meruach. Water is more physical than air or wind, and wind is usually connotating the soul, the neshama, but mayim is liquid, so therefore it's less material than dry matter, than solid matter. So it's kind of this intermediary between ruach and adamar, afar, domain, different expressions to connotate solid, non-liquid substance. And then, of course, we have Aish as well, right? Because those are the 4 Greek elements, Aish, Ruach, Mayim, Afar. And here it's Ruach and Mayim and so on. So it's Mayim, Ruach, Chakak, V'chatzaba, Chafbed, Osios, Mito, V'vohu. So here it's getting more into this kind of engraving and carving the 22 letters from Tohu V'vohu, Refes V'tit, mire and clay, Chakikan Kimin Aruga, Chotzvan Kimin Choma. He engraved them like a garden. I'm not sure, there's other interpretations of Aruga, and carved them Kimin Choma like a wall, Sivavam Kimin Ma'aziva, and he covered them like a ceiling, V'yatzak Aleim Shaleg, and he poured snow on top of them, V'nasa Afar, and it turned into dirt or dust. Shenemar ki l'sheleg yomar haveh aretz. Like it says in Job 37, verse 6, for to snow, he said, become earth. Kaplan says this is Chachma. Because the Medrash says breath gave birth to wisdom, and wisdom is represented by water. We do know that that water is sometimes a metaphor for Chachma. Now let's talk a little bit about this tohu vavohu refes vitit. This idea of the chaos. Everybody knows that in the Ari, there's this concept of olam hatohu. But the truth is that the Ari wasn't really mechadish, the concept of the olam hatohu. It's in the Zohar. It's even in earlier works, where you have this concept of what the Torah says. Now, by the way, this you could actually say some of the chidush of the Ari is based on the Sefer Yetzirah. It's possible to say that, some element of it, and even the influence on the Zohar as well, in particular with this tohu vavohu. So tohu vavohu is this concept where you take chaos and you channel it into creativity and into some ability to have a revach, to have a profit from, to take the raw energy and convert it into a product, so to speak. Spiritually speaking, it means taking potentiality that's unharnessed and fitting it into a order. That's why you probably heard the expression, the Lurianic expression, to take the power of the light of Tohu and to rearrange it into the world of Tikkun. That's like the whole purpose in Lurianic Kabbalah. So this idea of the snow turning into dust, which is a physical, which is the equivalent of Eish Ruach Mayim Afar. The final thing is earth. So you go from Mayim to Sheleg to Afar. You get the water becomes frozen, turns frosty, icy, and then that somehow creates Afar or Afer. Afar, dirt. And there's a lot on Tohu Vavohu. I've talked about this before. We spent a lot of time on it in some texts of the Zohar, so we're not gonna dwell on it now. We'll move over to Mishnah 12 on page 71. By the fourth of the 10 Sfirot, Eish Mimayim is now, we didn't get to fire yet. Now fire comes from the water. Chakak v'chatzaba kisei hakavod. With that, he engraved and he carved out the throne of divine glory. Srafim v'ofanim v'chayot hakodesh, the various angels, the srafim, ofanim, and chayot hakodesh, called the chayot. Malachei hasharet, ministering angels. Mishlashtan, and from these three, Yasad Ma'ono, he founded his abode. Shenamar Osam Alachav Yuchot Misharsav Eish Lohet. He made his angels a breath, his ministers of flaming fire. It's in Tehillim, Perek Kuf Daled 104, Pasuk Daled, Pasuk 4. So the three are breath, fire, and water. And from that, he made his dwelling, right? So which sphera is this? So Kaplan brings down that it's Bina. Fire kindles water. Okay. Now, why would we randomly have Keter, Malchut, Chachma, and Bina be the first four? It's not in order because Malchut is the last. Okay, so it's first, last, second, and third. Okay, it is what it is. And that if that's an interpretation that you like. Number 13 is very important because it has 6 sfirot. But again, the theory of the Sefer Yetzirah is a general theory of philosophy of more like 3,000 years ago, than even 2,000 years ago, which is the directions of the layout of your, community was really a map of heaven. So they would probably the pyramids, the Havdil between the Beit HaMikdash or the Mishkan and the pyramids, they were trying to make a certain alignment between maybe different zodiac signs and different geography of the river and the sun rising and the sunset, so that the topography of their kind of experience and their inner description of the universe, the spirits, would line up. So the instead of here I have a GPS that tells me how to get somewhere, back then what they would have is they had this kind of alignment of the directions that told the story. So it's to read Sefer Yetzirah, to ignore that in Sefer Yetzirah is very hard. You'll see why in this and many other Mishnayot within Sefer Yetzirah. Okay, so comes Mishnah 13 on page 80. Bir shalosh otiot min hapshutot. He chose 3 letters from the elementals. Pashut just means plain, actually. Besod shalosh imot. He took 3 from the plain and he made them 3 mothers. What are the 3 letters that are mothers? Aleph, Mem, and Shin. And we'll talk about why those 3 letters are mothers rather than just pshutot, simple, like many of the other letters. V'kavam b'shmo hagadol, and he established them in his great name. V'chasam b'hem shisha ksavot, and he sealed with them the 6 ksavot, extremities, which are directions, north, south, east, west, up and down. And he's going to spell them out very specifically and correlate them to 6 ways to spell out Yud He Vav of Yud Ke Vav Ke, of God's 4 letters of his divine name, of his transcendence. And that's what we're going to do. So the first one, Chamesh, Chasam Rom, Ufana L'mayla, V'chasmu B'Yud He Vav. The 5th of the 10, because we are up to number 5. We did the first 4. And the 5th is going on above. Okay. So he sealed above and faced upward, and he sealed it with a Yud, He, and Vav. Now, we'll talk about what sphere is above, right? Because usually you think above is Keter, Chachma. Now, normally we would say that the Shishak Savot correspond to Netzach, Chesed, Gvur, Tiferet, Netzach, Yisod, Malchut. So those 7 sfirot, right? So which one would be up? Would it be Chesed? Is Chesed going up? Is Gvur going up? So that's very tricky. If you look at page 84, you'll see that there's in table 14, Aryeh Kaplan has Sfirot, Chesed, Gvur, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yisod, and then directions, right, north, east, up, down, west, corresponding to chesed and onward. But that's the Ari. But if you look and there's many other configurations of how to get those six, of what those six are. Okay. So up, down in the Ari is one sphira, netzach. Okay. Let's go on. I'm sorry, netzach is up and hod is down. My mistake. So actually, it's not just the Ari. It seems the Ari and the Zohar, the Ari follows the Zohar, for lack of a. It's not that the Ari, the Zohar coincides with the Ari follows the way of the Zohar. So actually, there's not. So those are two major. Not everyone agrees with those things, but the fact that the Zohar and the Ari, that's like a big boost in that direction. Okay, so let's keep going in that. So the sixth is the sixth is downward, and the facing downward, and he sealed it with a hey yud vav, and shaveh chasam mizrach ufanav v'chasma vav yud hey. 7 he sealed east and faced straight ahead, and sealed it with a vav yud hey. Right? What do we say? East is connected to Tiferet. And then we have 8. Shmona chasam mariv ufanav la'achar v'chasma b'vav hey yud. He sealed west, faced backward, and sealed it with vav hey yud. And now we get to 9. Tesha chasam daram. He sealed south and funnel lumina v'chasma b'yud vav hey, and face it to the right and seal it with a yud vav hey. And then aser chasam tzafon and funnel the smaller v'chasma b'hei vav yud. 10 he sealed north and face to the left and seal it with a hey vav yud. So those are 6 ways, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 6 ways to configure, at least 6 ways, but 6 ways here that we configure the yud hey vav of God's name, and they represent above, below, east, west, south, north, south and north. So you've got 7, and they correspond, if according to the Kabbalah, to the 7 sfirot. Chesed Gvur Tiferes Netzach Hod Yesod. We're missing 1. We've got 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Didn't we have 7 here? No, only 6. We already had Malchut. My mistake. Okay, we only have 6 here. Mishnah 14, page 88. Don't worry about the details here, because it's basically saying is that there's the space, all the dimensions of space, at least these obvious dimensions of the 4 directions and up and down, are corresponding to a different configuration of the divine name. And they are the 6 additional sfirot other than the first 4. And again, this will play itself out, directions and so on. Elu es sfirot lima. These are the 10 sfirot of no thingness. Some people have achas, but we'll leave that out. Ruach Elokim Chaim, the breath of, or spirit of the living God. Ruach me ruach. So that was 1, is Ruach Elokim Chaim. Ruach me ruach, the spirit from spirit. Mayim me ruach, the water from spirit. Eish me mayim, the fire from water. So that's the 4. Plus the 6. 4 and 6 is 10. Rome v'sachas mizrach u'mayim tzafon v'daram, up down, east, west, north, and south. So that's just a little review of what we just did until now. So I'm not going to review the review. That's the review. That is chapter 1. Let's go into chapter 2. Page 95. Esim b'shtayim otyot yisod, shalosh imot b'sheva kfulot b'shtayim esrei pshutot. Shalosh imot aleph mem shin yisodon kav zchut v'kav chova chok machriya b'intayim. Shalosh imot aleph mem shin mem domemot lashon shin sareket. Shoreket. Aleph avir ruach machriya b'intayim. Now we're getting deeper into what we already just started here. 22 foundation letters, 3 mothers, 7 doubles, 12 elementals. So that's the breakdown of the 22 letters. Now we're going to do the first 3 mothers. We're going to spend some time here with. The 3 mothers are Aleph, Mem, Shin. Their foundation is a Kav, Zchut, v'Kav, Chova. He translates it as a pan of merit. The word pan, Kaf, is like when you have a measuring, a measuring device that you have. I guess you put something on either side. That's why he translates a pan, and to evaluate the weight of something, to measure it. This is a very common theme in the Zohar. This idea of measure, everything is measured in this kind of divine measuring device. So their foundation is one of a side of merit, and one is a side of demerit, the liability. Chok machriya b'intayim, and then there's the decree, but she translates it, and the tongue of decree. But it's the decree that is the intermediary, that's the middle, that mediates between the two extremes. Shalosh imos aleph mem shin, going back into the letters of the mother letters, the aleph, the mem, the shin. Let's take a look at them. Mem, the mem letter is domemot. Now you have to understand that the word and the expression of what part of the word is almost like in China. It's the words are pictures. Here in Hebrew, according to Sefer Yetzirah, the word stands for the part of the mouth that how it expresses that particular sound. The word for domain, which here in this context means quiet, which is, by the way, why we call inanimate object a domain, is because it doesn't talk, right? It's still. So it's the full extension of not talking is a domain, something that's stationary and still because it's dead. It's a rock. So the mem, domain, ma. Be quiet. So the mem is actually what we say shush should be mum. Who says mum? David Newton. Did the English say mum? Keep it mum. Who says that? Anyway, that's what the Sefer Yetzirah says. Is from domain, keep it quiet. The shin is the opposite. It's a hissing sound. Shh. It's funny because how do we tell people to be quiet? We yell at them. Shh. It's like the most obnoxious sound you can make, shush somebody. But so it's like yelling, hey, shut up, right? What's the worst thing you could tell somebody? Shut up. It's the opposite of being quiet. It's almost like you're gonna make noise. I'll be louder than you to try to make you quiet. But really, it's wrong. Our shushing, our telling people to shut up, is the opposite of the Sefer Yetzirah. The Sefer Yetzirah, it's a softer noise that tells us to quiet down. The shin is shrieking. The shin is the opposite of somebody shrill, and shrieking is the opposite effect of getting quiet. And the aleph is the breath of air deciding between them. What's the aleph? It's quiet. There's no sound in the aleph. It's a silent sound. So the aleph is what mediates between quietness, because quietness could turn into a being taken advantage of, and shrillness, which can be very annoying and you get your way, but nobody really likes you at a certain point. Okay, so that is Mishnah Aleph of Perek Beis. Let's go to Mishnah 2, page 100. Esrim b'shtayim otiyot, the 22 letters, Yesod, foundation letters. Chakagan chatzon tzarfan shaklan behemiran. He engraved them, he carved them, he permuted them. He another form of exchanging them, which he's translating is he weighed them. Vitzar behem es kol yitzur. He created everything that would be formed with them. Veskol ha'asad latzur, and everything that would in the future be formed. So here's where it gets very interesting. If you're there are Kabbalistic interpretations, and some of them are already in the Talmud. So, for example, you'll look on table 17 on page 101. You have the Aleph base on the left-hand side. And then you have on the second from left, Mishkal, you have the numeric equivalent. Like Aleph is 1, Yud is 10, Chaf is 20, Kuf is 100, Reish is 200, Shin is 300, Taf is 400. Then it's actually interesting, the final letters, like the final Chaf, the final Mem, are 5 and 600, and final Nun and final Fei is 7, 800, final Tzadik is 900. And then you have something called At Bash. What that means is that you take the first letter and you match it with the final letter, the last letter. So Aleph and Taf are matched up, and then Beis and Gimel, the second letter from the beginning is matched up with the second letter from the end of the Aleph, and so on all the way down. And then there's an additional 5 different ways of permuting letters that in different configurations that he really did a nice job of putting it all on one in table 17. So, for example, in the third one, it's Aleph relates to Chet, and Beis relates to Tet. So they're always the 8th letter from that letter, and so on. Gimel to Yud, and then eventually the later letters go, like the Ayin relates to Aleph and so on. Okay, so this again, if we're saying like what we call science, the Sefer Yetzirah understood a science, but it wasn't science based on scientific experiment. It was based on their kind of conception of language as the creative force. And how do you get to that? Obviously, creation is complex. So there's got to be a complexity to language of numerology, this idea of the otiot and the timurot and their permutations and so on and so forth. Okay, now Mishnah 3, page 102. I mentioned before the part of the mouth, right, and the letter that we're pronouncing, what it comes from. So to understand this Mishnah, we know there's 4 parts of the mouth that are primarily from a there's an art that I'm not really familiar with. So it's something that, like, I looked it up on the internet and I need to look a little bit more into. Linguist, the part of the linguistic knowledge is just understanding what part of the person's mouth or throat is primarily functioning during the pronunciation of that particular letter or letters. So you have the throat called the gutturals, the palate called the palatals, the tongue called the linguals, the teeth called the dentals, and the lips called the labials. And those are going to, within those five, every letter of the Aleph Beis will be, unless it's even the silent letters will appear in one of those five. So let's do that in the Mishnah. Esrim b'shtayim otiot yisod chakagan b'kol chatzon b'ruach kavan b'peh v'chamisha mekomot. 22 foundation letters. He engraved them with his voice. He carved them with his breath. He set them in his mouth in 5 places. Aleph ches hey ayin b'garon. Those 5 letters, the Aleph, the Chet, the Hey, the Ayin, in the throat. So Aleph, ha. It's coming from the throat. Gimel, the next group, next 4. Gimel, Yud, Kaf, Kuf. Right? Those 4.
I think you skipped base, vav, mem, pay. Base. Yeah.
You know what? It's different nuschot.
I'm looking at a different version.
Yeah, you're looking at a different version. There's a lot of, it's probably just a different version. So the Gimel Yud Chaf Kaf B'chayich is in the palate. So that would be like Gimel. The Sephardim, or not necessarily the regular Sephardim, but maybe like the
Yemenites.
So Gimel, but I don't know how they say it. The Chaf, the Kuf, is in the palate, and the Dal Tes Lamed Nun Taf is Belashon in the tongue. Da, lamed. Your tongue is like the most active in those letters. Zayin Samach Shin Reish Tzadik. Those are b'shinayim in the teeth, like Sama, Shin. They need a lot of teeth into them. You got to cut your teeth on those letters. Beis Vav Mem Pei. Bisvasayim in the lips. Beis. Mem. I thought I already did mem. Okay. So those are how all the letters are broken down into the parts of the mouth. Mishnah 4. Now the Kabbalists try to figure out how those phonetic families fit in to the 10 sfirot, usually combining 2 sfirot into each one of them. So for example, one way of looking at it would be Keter and Malchut are Daled Taf Lamed Nun Tet. Chachma Bina Zayin Mem Shin Reish Tzadik. Okay. Mishnah 4, page 108. Esim b'shem otiot yisod kavan begalgal kimin choma. Bereish lamed aleph sha'arim. The 22 foundation letters, he placed them in a circle like a wall with 231 gates. The choza hagalgal panim v'achar. And this circles back and forth. This way, like a merry-go-round that goes around. It could mean that it goes around and then around the other way. Front and back. A sign for this is that there's nothing in good higher than oneg, which is delight, like the Karat Shabbat oneg, called Shabbos a delight. And there's nothing in evil worse than nega. Nega is a plague when we talk about tsarat, negai. It's an affliction. Let's talk a little bit about the 231 gates. So Arya Kaplan points out very simply that if you take a number of lines that could be connected to 22 letters placed in a circle is 22 times 21, half of that. I have a picture 18 on page 11. Making the calculation, we find there are 231 such lines. Those are the 231 gates. So in other words, 22, and that gets to 231 here. Look at the picture. It's a pretty cool picture. If you make these 22, each letter is a thing, and then they crisscross all these times, and you get to 231. It's pretty cool. Look at that. You could just meditate on these things. Pretty cool, right? I look at the computer, they look like they're psychedelic. They look like they're moving around or something.
Yeah, right.
Check that out.
It's vibrating.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. That's just the computer. I wish I had a better computer, but right now my computer does, stuff. It does stuff. Now, figure 21. Yeah, that's your homework. Figure 21, figure that out. I'll test you next week. Where he does this, he does the 21, he lines up the Aleph base 21 different times in this triangular array. It's very interesting. Here he shows you, for example, to get to like 8 points is going to come up with 21 lines. So when we get to the 22 points, you get to the 231 lines. Okay. Let's do one more Mishnah. Yeah, there's a lot on this. Let's just do one more Mishnah. We're not going to finish this chapter now. Actually, let's see. Maybe we can. Ketzad, Sarfan Shaklan Behemiran. It's Mishnah 5, page 124. How? He permuted them, he weighed them, he transformed them. Echadim Kulam, one, the Aleph, the first letter, with all of them, Bekulam Imecha Aleph, and all of the letters, like both directions. Aleph with them with Aleph. Beis and Kulam, the same thing with Beis, Bekulam and Beis. The second letter with all of them, and all of them with the Beis. Bechozeret Chalila, and this reverts and happens, repeats again. B'nimsat b'Rish Lamed Aleph Sha'arim, and they are within all 231 gates. And it turns out that all that exists, all that's created, comes out of one name. So all of these names are one name, right? This could be a theme that we see in the Ramban, and we see it in the Zohar. This idea of all of the names of God the whole Torah is all the names of God, and it's all one name. There's a concept like that, and that's in Kabbalah. So maybe it's really coming from here. Okay, Mishnah 6, page 131. Yatzar mamish mitohu ba'asa es eno yeshno. He formed substance out of the tohu, out of the chaos, and he made that which was not into that which is. B'chatzav amudim gedolim ma'avir she'ena nitfas. V'zeh siman aleph from kulam v'kulam aleph. He carved great pillars from air that cannot be grasped. This is a sign. Aleph with them all, and all of them with Aleph. So Tzofo Amemir v'Asas Kol Yitzur v'Eskol HaDibur Shem Echad v'Sim L'Davar Esem V'Shtayim Chfetzim B'Guf Echad. He foresees, he transforms and makes all that is formed and all that is spoken. One name, a sign for the thing, 22 objects in a single body. So now he's kind of exploring this concept of the many and the one. So he gives this mashal of the 22 things within a single body. And now he's again repeating himself almost when we're talking about the four basic elements and the tohu and the dibur and the tmurot. Now he's kind of he does each thing separately and then he brings them all together. That's the classic kind of poetry of the Sefer Yetzirah. It keeps going in this kind of secretive way. Mishnah. I think we actually finished chapter 2, because my goal was we could do each week a chapter or two even. So this way we can actually have a chance at finishing, because maybe in the next, after Pesach, when we resume, we'll do 2 chapters a week if we can. That would be nice.